Okay, so what we're going to look at here is multiple alleles. And up to now, we've looked at all sorts of different genetic crosses, but they've always just been two different alleles. Yeah? So, you'd have your big F or your little f for cystic fibrosis. You'd have your big H or your little h for haemophilia or Huntington's disease. You'd have your pea plants that were either yellow or green. All of those, just two alleles every time. However, there are lots and lots of situations that have more than two. Okay, so more than two alleles available. Okay, now that's not to say that you're going to get any more. You've still only got two parents, you're still only going to inherit two alleles, but there are more than two to choose from. There are more than two out there, okay? Remembering that different alleles arise as a result of mutation. So all that we're saying here is that more mutations have taken place. And the best example is blood group, okay? And blood groups have got a whole bunch of different alleles going on. So we've got, if we have our alleles here, we could have allele A, we could have allele B, or we could have allele O. Okay? And what we need to be aware of is that A and B are co-dominant to each other. Okay? But both A and B are dominant to O. Alright? So sometimes what you see is that they write it down, instead of writing it down just simply like this, they might write down B for blood group, and you could have blood group with the allele A, you could have blood group with the allele B, and that's how you can tell that these are co-dominant, and then blood group O, and O is recessive. And these two are co-dominant. Okay? So this is how we end up with our different blood groups, because the blood group that you could get, you could be blood group A, because you'd have presumably got either that as your genotype, or you might have ended up with that as your genotype. You could end up with blood group B, and then obviously you'd have B, B, or you could have B, O, or you could have blood group AB, where obviously you'd have to have had an A and a B, or you could be blood group O, and you'd have had to have had two O's for that, because if you had an A or a B, then you would be blood group A or B. Okay, so if we're thinking about how these work, there's a whole extra layer of things going on. You are only going to inherit, as you can see from the genotypes, you're only going to inherit two alleles. But there's more than two alleles to choose from. There are three different alleles, two of which are co-dominant, one is recessive. Now, in other examples, and there are many, many examples of multiple alleles, sometimes you can kind of go for an order of dominance, in the same way as you could have an order of reactivity in metals. So, you could get one where A was the most dominant, B was dominant to O but not dominant to A, and then O would be the least dominant. But for blood groups, we've got a pair that are co-dominant and one that is recessive. Okay, so if we're looking at any inheritance of characteristics where multiple alleles are involved, you've got to look and see which one is the most dominant and which one is the least dominant or the most recessive. Okay, and there are exam questions that are linked directly to this. That's basically how it works though. Okay, so what I've got here for you is another example. So this is rabbit fur colour. Alright, now these are the alleles. Okay, and we can see that we get a capital C, and that capital C is obviously the dominant allele, and this is just the normal brown fur. that you'd see in a wild rabbit. Okay, so we call this one wild type. If you ever see that, you know that's the one that normally occurs in the wild, kind of like in nature. Nobody's selectively bred these, it's just what you would end up with if you just looked at them in the wild. That is dominant to all of the other alleles. The next one down, the CH here, can you see this is a lowercase c? All of these are lowercase c's, they're all recessive to the wild type. This one is chinchilla fur. Now, that's not the same as natural chinchilla, although chinchillas have chinchilla fur. What chinchilla fur means is that it's got a black tip on a white hair. So if you imagine the actual hair like that, that end of it is going to be dark, and down at the base is going to be paler. Okay, you get a lot of this happening in rabbits. It gets called chinchilla. In mice, you get something similar called agouti, which if you Google that and have a little look at it, is a similar sort of thing going on. It's basically like ombre hair, but naturally. So it changes colour from the base to the tip. So if you snipped off a patch of fur here, then what you would see is a different colour in that patch, because you'd see the colour underneath, not the colour at the tip. So chinchilla is where all over the rabbit is one colour at the base of its hairs and a darker colour, so like darker points. Okay, this one stands for Himalayan, and Himalayan fur is where the rabbit will be white all over except for at its extremities. So you imagine you've got your little rabbit here. This is a terribly bad drawing of rabbit. You've got your little rabbit there. At its extremities, so it's the tips of its ears, tip of its nose, tip of its tail, tip of its paws, it's going to be dark. Okay, and everywhere else it's going to be white. And then this one is the most recessive of all. This is what albino. Okay, and it's going to be white all over. So if you think about the combinations you could get, if you had a big C with anything else, it's going to be brown. Yeah, it's going to be wild type. Whereas, let me just move this up a little bit. If you had a CCH with either a CH or another CCH, it could be homozygous for that, or it could be this one, or it could be CCH with a C, then it's going to be chinchilla. And it's going to have that colouring. Okay, so anything with a big C, doesn't matter what else you put with it, it's going to be the wild type brown colour. This CCH with anything else is going to give you chinchilla. CH with another CH or CH with a C is going to give you Himalayan. And the only way you're going to get an albino is to have one that's homozygous recessive. The two little C's is going to give you that. So it just comes down to looking at exam questions and really thinking through what the combinations are, making sure you've read all the information in the question, and then working out what genotypes will lead to which phenotypes. And you'll have it, no problem.